have a motion to suspend the rules for the purpose of considering resolutions which do not appear on the agenda?
So moved, Mr. President.
Moved and seconded. Roll call.
Councilwoman Perkins Dustin. Councilman Questa.
Aye.
Councilman Rowland.
Aye.
Councilman Keenan. Councilman Sedan.
Aye.
Councilman Bowman.
Aye.
Councilman Mazza.
Aye.
President Gonzalez.
Aye.
There's 3 items. First item is letter dated February 14, 2012, from the Business Administrator requesting authorization for the proper city officials to utilize the competitive contracting process for the procurement of the service of private collection of municipal court debt. Next item, the letter is dated February 14, 2012, from the Director of Planning and Community Development, requesting that your honorable body consider a resolution enabling Future City, Inc. to apply to the Department of Environmental Protection Green Acres Program for funding for the Jackson Park Restoration Project and authorize the proper city officials to enter into a memorandum of understanding regarding the same in an amount not to exceed $250,000. The City of Elizabeth is eligible to match the proposed $250,000 grant. Council President Gonzalez is presenting a resolution submitted by the League President of the New Jersey League of Municipalities, requesting municipalities to support the New Jersey Employers Support National Guard and Reserve with their Employment Initiative Program.
I understand, Councilman Questa, you have an additional item.
Yeah, I'm going to vote on this resolution first, Mr. President.
They would need to be done all together.
Sorry?
Council says they would need to be done all together.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I'm asking the City Clerk on behalf of the City Council to send a letter to the Acting Commissioner of Education Commissioner Cerf and also members of the legislature. And I'm doing so, I'm asking the letter to indicate that this body is requesting the state to monitor the expenditures of the Elizabeth Board of Education. I am making this request, Mr. President, because as you know, recently the Board of Education spent more than $500,000 in paying Supreme Court Justice Gary Stein, retired, to investigate the Board of Ed. This was a bogus investigation. As anyone from common sense will tell you, if you gave me $500,000, yes, I can investigate and give you the results you want as well. It must be noted, Mr. President, that Mr. Stein, Justice Stein, spent most of the press conference not addressing the issue for which he was paying, but rather stating how wonderful the board was and also attacking, unjustifiably so, I would say, Senator Lesniak and Mayor Baldwin. And that was totally uncalled for. He also, I must add, he also criticized and attacked members of the public who came forward with information. And by doing so, in my humble opinion, he was trying to silence the whistleblowers who first came forward with information. Perhaps Justice Stein needs to be reminded that whistleblowing is something that is not only acceptable, but it's also something that is legal, and people have a right to express their opinion without fear of retaliation. Mr. President, the citizens and taxpayers of Elizabeth are sick and tired of paying for the board integrations and abuse of power. Paying a law firm more than $500,000 to investigate a board's actions simply flies in the face of logic and common sense. And let's not forget a huge conflict of interest, Mr. President. The son of Justice Stein works for the Board of Education. Enough is enough. We must demand that the state take action against individuals who only care about their political life and simply ignore the needs of the children. And I must say, Mr. President, I keep saying $500,000, but from what I read in the paper, it's almost $1 million. Because in addition to the $500,000, Justice Stein himself indicated that he has yet to get paid for January and February. So that is really an absurd amount of money. In addition to that, they paid several investigators to do what I don't know. So the total amount of money that the board spent on the self-investigation over $1 million. And that is ridiculous. That has not been faced
resolution.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Do I have a motion?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Are there any comments?
Chairman, can we
Counsel.
have a copy of the speech that Mr. Questa made so I could review again? Because I had a hard time understanding what he was trying to say.
Sure, Representative. I don't think Councilman would have a problem sharing.
No, and I believe the Supreme Court also took note, so that's all the information. And this reading being read, so every word I said was recorded. Mr. Chairman.
I have to vote. You have to know what I'm voting. He wasn't too clear to understand what he said.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. President. Should I repeat my entire presentation, or did you understand me, Mr. President?
Yes, I did.
You understood me? Thank you, Mr. President.
I would like to get a copy, Mr. President, if possible, before we voting, and then are we voting as a package or separate?
Councilman Mazza, the councilman presented his statement that he wants us to, recognize what has been done by the Board of Education, their expenditures of over $500,000 on what basically turns out to be a public relations campaign versus an investigation into corruption at the Elizabeth Board of Education. That pretty much sums it up.
Who's he going to ask? Which department?
Councilman, who did you want to send that to again?
And that's the Acting Commissioner of Education Commissioner Cerf, and also to all legislators.
Any other comments?
Yes, Mr. President.
Councilwoman Perkins.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, as my colleague made the resolution to go down to Acting Commissioner Cerf, I thought about the comments that were made by the Elizabeth Board of Education Commissioner here this evening regarding the publication for police. And I thought about it, Mr. President, because that publication is for informational purposes. And it clearly denotes where the funding from that publication derived from, which was confiscated drug money. Now, the Board of Ed seems to put out a lot of publications, Mr. President, and it does not denote where the funding comes from those publications. In addition to that, Mr. President, the speaker talked about our Elizabeth Police Department, which is one of the finest police departments in the state of New Jersey, if not America. Our police department is up to date. Our police personnel do have the proper equipment to go about and preventing and fighting crime and saving lives and protecting the citizens here in the city of Elizabeth. I take great offense to another elected official coming to our body talking about our police department. Thirdly, Mr. President, the only reason why, if we are down in numbers, is because of the current governor that sits down in Trenton, who our Elizabeth Board of Ed happily supported him wholeheartedly. And when the governor was sworn into office, he went on a direct attack against our police and fire personnel across the state of New Jersey. How dare he? How dare the speaker talk about our police department when it's one of the finest that we have in the state? It is well manned, male and female, and we constantly give out promotions when due. We recently had a class of close to 20 cadets, Mr. President, if I'm not mistaken, just last month, if I'm not mistaken. So I really take offense to elected officials coming up here trying to throw stones at our house when they live in a glass house. Mr. President, there's so many things going amiss in our public school system. If you go down to school number 1, George Washington School number 1 on Broadway, you see a lot of things awry. Even if you go to Elmora School number 12, you have children with no lockers, but we can pay close to $1 million to a smoke screen investigation. Mr. President, we have some real fundamental issues with our Elizabeth Board of Education, but you don't see us as an elected body going to the Elizabeth Board of Education are neighborhood meetings going on in your neighborhood, and you can go out to them, that you can connect yourself with police detectives that'll be there to work for you. Now, I don't see anything wrong with that, Mr. President. Some may call it propaganda, others may call it service. So, Mr. President, I will be supporting wholeheartedly the resolution as it was stated by my colleague, every word. Thank you.
Are there any comments? Councilman Grover?
I want to add something to Councilwoman's comments. Speaker also mentioned that we could have used that money for salaries. If he had done his homework, he would know that you cannot use drug money for salaries. It is not permitted under the state code. That money is for the purpose of providing information and improving our policing. And I think this brochure is right up that alley. It states clearly up there where the money came for to promote it, which was not the case with a lot of the stuff that's being sent out for the board. We don't self-promote. We're providing information in this brochure, and that's all it is. Thank you.
Are there any other comments? Councilman Pino?
Mr. President, first of all, I want to support Councilman Quest's resolution. One point that I'd like to dwell on is the Starlight article said that Mr. Justice Stein interviewed 193 persons from the Board of Education. These are people employed by the Board of Education. Knowing that Mr. Stein is working at the behest of the Board of Education, it is not surprising to me that persons would feel intimidated and not want to honestly speak out and say, yes, I was approached to buy a fundraising ticket or what have you. Their very livelihood is at stake. Their mortgage payment, their rent payment, food on their table. So that is a very, very big flaw in the methodology of the report. It's glaring, it's offensive, and that alone is reason to cast a pall on the entire report. Thank you very much.
Councilman, any other comments?
Mr. President,
Councilman Sedano?
I just want to share something very brief. It's funny because I feel like I was in the same meeting as all the rest of you except Mr. Mazza, simply because I know you mentioned that the elected official, Carlos Trujillo, was bashing the police department, and in no way, shape, or form did I ever hear him bash the police department. If anything, I heard him say that the police department is a great department here in the city of Elizabeth. He just came forward and he had questions concerning the brochure. He didn't make any accusations. He had questions, and just like a resident from the city of Elizabeth, everyone is entitled to come up and ask questions. And questions is something that we're all entitled to do the same way each of us, if any of us had any concern with the report that was done concerning the investigation, you could always go to the Board of Education and ask questions. What Councilman Cuesta is doing here, to me...
Councilman, you are not to use the names of your colleagues in your statement. That is inappropriate.
Okay, that's fine. Well, the person that introduced the resolution, who's sitting right next to me, decided to bring this up, and this is pretty much, to me, a complete political stance with what's happening next to me. It's one thing to ask questions. If you're so concerned, Mr. Cuesta, I apologize. If you're concerned, council person sitting next to me, you can always go to the Board of Ed and reach out to them and see what can be done from there, from that aspect. And I know they're trying to paint a bad light on the Board of Education, but what everyone back home needs to understand is that we have a political boss who's Senator Lesniak, who's constantly trying to destroy the Board of Education. And to say at the same time, I know there's another council member that mentioned all the things that the Board of Ed sends out is just self-promoted. That's false. That's false. There are informational pieces that the community needs to know about. So I'm definitely not going to support this political resolution that's next to me on that side of my colleague, and everything else I will support except that. Thank you, Mr. President.
Are there any other comments? Only once. Anybody who has not spoken who would like to speak again?
I just need a point of order, Mr. President.
Point of order. There's a point of order.
Thank you.
Councilwoman.
I wanted to
But you already had the opportunity to speak, Councilman.
Yeah, I only spoke on one, but I didn't realize that, after the fact that,
I'm sorry, Councilman, but I can't allow anybody to speak a second time. Just press around.
I'm not going to be able to support the other resolutions without getting clarification.
President, just
Is it a point of order?
Point of order.
Or just points of order?
Just a point of order. I know Councilman Mazza.
Councilman, once again, you cannot use your colleagues' names when you discuss it.
I'm just saying that he brought up.
Why is he still speaking?
This is a point of order. This is a point of order. I know someone brought up that pretty much, are we voting on this as a package or is it individual pieces?
We're voting on all four portions. If you wish to abstain or not support one, then you can do that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President.
All four portions of what, Mr. President? I need another point of order.
It's just like every other resolution.
Right.
There are four separate resolutions, so we're going to be calling each of them separately, correct? Okay, thank you.
Well, you can indicate which one you would support or not support.
Oh, okay, I understand. Okay.
Mr. President,
Thank you.
Is it a point of order, Councilman?
do I get a...
Is it a point of order? If it's not a point of order, then no.
Yes, it's spoken, Mr. Council.
I didn't speak on any of the,
You have not spoken?
I didn't speak on none of the objectives that I was supposed to be voting on.
You spoke already.
I have four items.
Yes, he did. He spoke when Councilman was the first one to speak. When Councilman...
You spoke already.
Yeah, he did.
You spoke already. You're one of the first ones to
I
speak.
spoke, Mr. President, directly to you to clarify. I wasn't understanding what he asked you for a copy of the councilman that he's trying to do something.
I've spoken already. No.
Okay.
We will move on. Is there anyone else who has not spoken who would like to speak?
Can't believe it.
Seeing none, roll call.
Councilman...
Excuse me, sir. Would you please refrain yourself from your laughter? Oh, please. Okay? Well, you're disrupting the meeting.
Councilwoman Perkins Dusty.
Excuse on the Green Acres. I on the other resolutions. Excuse on the Green Acres application, I on the other resolution.
Councilman Questa.
Aye.
Councilman Grover. Councilman Keenan. Councilman Sedano.
Yes to everything except the resolution to the state concerning the Board of Education.
Councilman Baldwin.
Aye.
Councilman Matheson.
I would like to say yes on the Green Acres because I know what a great job that Future City is doing. I would like to say yes on the draft resolution for the military initiative. I would like to excuse myself on the private collection of municipal court debt because I didn't get an opportunity to ask questions and to find out what are we going to be looking for, how much money is going to be involved. And I'm voting no on the resolution that will be going to the state because I did not understand the councilman what he was presenting before this body.
President Gonzalez.
Aye.